Oh, you did? You gave them to the administration? Oh, I didn't know that.
That's true. Maybe I get this. You wouldn't
I did that.
Call this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Madam Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel.
Madam Clerk, she did text me that she was going to be unable to attend the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Perez Verdia.
Present.
And Mr. Dyson asked to be excused.
Yes, so both Ms. Zalatel and Mr. Dyson are excused. At this time, Mr. Hemstreet, you're the closest. Would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Minutes of previous meetings, there are none. Mr. Mayor, would you like to give a report? You don't have to.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I was asking if the mayor wanted to give a report.
Sorry.
It's all right. He is approaching the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will defer giving a report until after the ceremonial portion of this proceeding, if that's okay with you and the members of the Assembly.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Assembly's chair's report, I do not have one. Committee reports, let's see if we can go down the dais here. Mr. Perez Verdia, do you have an assembly report, a committee report?
No report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just a minute, I'm not, it's not moving.
Okay.
I just got an email from somebody that says it's moved up.
Okay, we're going to pause briefly and try to resolve some IT issues. Do we need, Ms. Quinn-Davidson, do you have a report?
I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn-Davidson. Mr. Dyson is excused. Mr. Constant?
No report, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Peterson?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the Ethics and Election Committee is going to meet tomorrow virtually from noon to 1. And we're going to be discussing a possible necessary recount in the most recent election on Proposition 1, if I'm correct.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weddleton?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No report.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Zalatel, I assume she's still excused. Okay. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Rules Committee meeting is going to be meeting via Teams this Friday at 12 noon. We will begin discussing implementation of the alcohol tax, and we'll have a lot to share on that, as well as talking about sort of getting back to business and what that looks like for Assembly Committee work sessions and other work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to report.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. All right. So at this time, we would usually have a motion to incorporate the addendum to the agenda. Instead, I would ask that folks, because there are 3 laid on the table items, we just move them all independently. So the first is 9A1. Is there a motion to introduce that?
Move to introduce.
Nope. This is,
Move to introduce.
I guess, can we just move to approve it? It's a resolution. So can you move to approve that, Mr. Peterson?
Move to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Oh, Ms. LaFrance? Okay. So moved and seconded. Is there any opposition to this resolution?
I'm not sure I've seen that. Was that emailed?
Oh, shoot. You know, that's... Ms. Veneklassen, was that emailed to folks?
Mr. Chair, I believe that it was, but I will follow up with another email right now.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, this
Yes.
is Ms. Kennedy.
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, can you also read off exactly what the title of those are?
Yes.
Because I don't have an updated agenda. So thank you.
Will do, Ms. Kennedy. Did you send that out, Ms. Veneklassen? Great. 9A1 is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and congratulating all of the election workers and officials and Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk, and election administrators for a successful election in 2020 during the COVID-19 public health emergency. That's why Ms. Jones didn't know that we were laying it on the table. Mr. Welton, did you receive that?
Well, I don't.
What's that, Miss?
I'm going to assume by the title that it's probably fine, but I don't see it here. I got 4:45 from Barbara, a variety of things related to the election, but is it in there?
Mr. Chair, we were trying to be a little sneaky, and so I will send it out right now. We were trying to keep Barbara out of the loop on that one, so we'll get it out to Assembly members right now.
Very
Okay.
sneaky.
Okay. And we outthought ourselves on that one a little bit.
Weddleton here. I got it, and it looks tremendous.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. So is there any is there any opposition to this resolution? Okay. So with that, Mr. Peterson, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. AR number 2020-129, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and congratulating all of the election workers and officials and Barbara Jones, municipal clerk and election administrator, for a successful election in 2020 during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Whereas on March 12, 2020, Mayor Berkowitz declared a state of emergency in the municipality of Anchorage related to the threat of the novel coronavirus 2019, COVID-19, and it was extended by the Assembly that same day by AR 2020-85. And whereas April 7th, 2020, the municipality of Anchorage was to hold its regularly scheduled election, and whereas pursuant to Anchorage Municipal Code Section 28.10.020, the municipal clerk, Ms. Barbara Jones, is to supervise all municipal elections. And whereas Ms. Jones acted promptly, early, and appropriately when the spread of the COVID-19 was just becoming a public health concern, to draft and propose AO 2020-33, providing authority in an emergency to close accessible vote centers and take other action to protect election workers, voters, the integrity of the election, and the individual right to voter franchise. And whereas the 2020 vote at home, vote by mail election was held as scheduled on April 7th, 2020, and was a remarkable success, with a non-mayoral record of 31.75% voters turning out to cast 71,382 ballots. In spite of frequently changing circumstances during the COVID-19 public health emergency, and was the envy of other jurisdictions scrambling to respond to the pandemic. And whereas the success of the 2020 vote at home, vote by mail election can be attributed to the leadership of Ms. Jones and the unwavering dedication of the election employees and commissioners and the visionary leaders who helped convert Anchorage to its vote at home, vote by mail election, including former Deputy Clerk Amanda Mosier. And finally, the Anchorage voters who embraced the convenience of vote at home, vote by mail, and cast their ballot even amid the COVID-19 public health emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly recognizes and honors Barbara Jones and all the election workers and commissioners for an outstanding effort and celebrates the fruition of their hard work, a successful municipal election in 2020. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 21st day of April, 2020.
This is the presentation copy. Here, okay. Try to maintain social distancing. Do you have any words for us, Ms. Jones?
Well, I'm afraid I might cry, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Okay. Well, so now we have two other late on the table items, 9F1 and 9F2. So I guess I will read the titles and then we'll see if we have motions to introduce. Late on the table, item 9F1, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly terminating Regulation Number 5 of Proclamation of Emergency Hunker Down Order EO03V2, updated and reissued by the Mayor on April 14th, 2020. Are there any motions regarding this?
Motion to postpone.
I think the phone may have been first, and I think I recognize Ms. Kennedy, but
Okay.
I haven't got a second.
So this is, I believe it was going to be set for public hearing as opposed to, I believe our other title had it being set for public hearing on the 28th. Is that correct?
Weddleton, that's correct. And to the chair, I'd like to give the mayor an opportunity to speak on this. I wonder, is that allowed to do it? I know
Any motion first?
Crystal had moved to introduce, and I know the mayor would like to speak on this, and I had a few questions.
The clerk would like to speak.
Okay. She moved to approve, and I think she was first, but he moved to postpone. If she doesn't want to approve, then his motion has priority.
Well, I'm not moving to postpone. I just want to give the mayor a chance to speak. Crystal's motion would be more properly moved to introduce. Is that correct? Because it's for public hearing.
I don't know. It's up to you, Mr. Chair. Her motion was to approve it. You can't debate it or.
But I can change that to introduce, because that was my intention.
Oh, she just said she wanted to move to
I can
introduce.
second Chris's motion for the purpose of discussion.
Well, but she had the first motion on the floor. I'm not sure that's how it works. Is it a race in that way, Ms. Jones?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go
I was
ahead.
also trying to move or second at the same time. I don't know if it was audible.
Okay. So we don't usually do late on the table items at this meeting, right? And this is why. But the late on the table item is set for public hearing on the 28th. Right? That is what the motion is, not move to approve tonight. If they get a motion, a second, and a third, it's not a debatable motion, and it's moved for public hearing on the 28th. And then we're done, and we move on tonight.
But there wasn't a second, and I believe I got in there and made a motion to postpone.
I think
I think we should probably take a pause and check Robert's rules.
Okay. Mr. Gates, would you like to, and Ms. Vogel, collaborate with Ms. Jones and see what the proper motions are, or what the proper order of the motions are?
Yes, I would like that recess.
Thank you. All right, we'll take a brief recess. Thank you. Mr. Gates, you're in the queue. Here, we'll go back on the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Dean Gates. So the question is, if I make sure I get this question correct, please. Someone has moved to set a public hearing for this resolution. Someone else at the same time has moved to postpone. And the question is, who gets to make a motion first?
Yes.
Correct. And in Robert's
point of
rules,
order. Point of order.
Yes.
There's a subsequent element to that, and that is that the mover of the second motion had a second, whereas the previous mover didn't.
Okay, so that's the second part about a second we can deal with next. The first part is about who made a motion first, then who gets to second that. So the first part is my understanding in Robert's Rules of Order. It does say that the mover of a motion is normally given the first opportunity to speak to the motion. And I would extrapolate that and say the proponent of legislation, resolution, or ordinance is given the first opportunity to make a motion related to what they've put on the agenda or submitted for the agenda. And that aside, I think that's also just fundamentally fair. The sponsors of something that they've submitted should be able to have the first opportunity to make a motion on it. That motion to postpone is always available next. It's a subsidiary motion to that if it goes that way. And then I would finally just add that this decision is really in parliamentary law and in our code a decision of the chair, and then it can be objected to by a member and put to a majority vote if somebody disagrees with the chair's ruling on who got to make a motion first.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Okay, so using that idea, and the sponsors were Weddleton, LaFrance, and Kennedy. Ms. Kennedy made a motion, and I would give her the opportunity to make a motion and then see if there are any seconds or
Mr. Chair,
thirds.
I would just ask to be in the queue immediately preceding Ms. Kennedy, as I was in the order of motions.
You mean following Ms. Kennedy?
Following Ms. Kennedy, I would like to be recognized immediately thereafter, before any other motions are laid on the table.
Okay. Mr. Gates, if it is a motion to introduce and set for public hearing, and they get 3 people, a mover, a second, and a third, can you then make a motion to postpone, or is it already set?
I don't have real clear guidance on this. I think that would be a decision for the chair, but I would look at what we usually do, and usually for second, third is the end of it, and all other motions happen when we have the public hearing and when it's closed, and then so forth. But the clerk might have some historical knowledge, but generally I think this is mostly a decision of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ms. Jones?
No, the only thing that I have is that if I did find something, if similar to Mr. Gates, if Ms. Kennedy has the floor and made a motion, but before the chair states the motion, she can correct it. That's what I found.
All right. Ms. Kennedy, do you want to make a motion? And if so, what is that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about all the confusion. My motion would be the motion to move to introduce and set the public hearing for the date of April 28th. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'm in the queue, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to allow people to have a second and a third, and then you can make a subsequent motion. But there's an opportunity for people to make seconds and thirds.
Weddleton, second.
Is there a third?
Third.
Okay.
I actually don't know that that's accurate, but I will bow to the chair.
Well, I can't recall in 4 years
Now
the
that
case
it's
where
been
people.
moved second and then third, I
Yes.
will now make my motion to postpone.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion to postpone? Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay. So I think it is highly unusual to make a motion to postpone on something that has been introduced. However, it was also unusual to introduce something at this meeting. So I'm going to allow us to debate the motion to postpone. What date are you postponing until?
For introduction, it would be the meeting of May 5th,
So you have a motion to postpone until May 5th.
the public hearing. Yep.
Well, you can't postpone the public hearing. You can postpone, well, okay,
Introduction and-
the introduction and, okay, you're postponing the introduction and the concomitant public hearing until May 5th.
Yes.
All right? Would anyone like to debate that motion?
Yes.
Please use the queue, and I have my phone here if people want to send me a text. And that was moved by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Constant, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have an opinion on the underlying resolution at this time. In fact, I don't think that I am well enough versed on the various proposals and the very swiftly moving tide that is underpinning what the movers have intended to do. Now, as we all know, a resolution can be moved at a regular meeting and heard at a regular meeting, but the intent here is to set a public hearing. Now, I understand from our council that a public hearing...
She's in my office.
I'm sorry, on the phone, could you please mute your phones? Please continue, Mr. Constant.
That a public hearing that the assembly sets for a resolution can be at any time, but that brings me to the objection, and that's a custom that this body has taken on, that we don't use this meeting for political purposes. And that's what has been done tonight. So until this code is clarified and made clear that this meeting isn't actually a regular meeting intended for the purposes of other business, or it is, we open the doors and we just make it a regular meeting. I think that this introduction is out of order, and it's really improper for us to be doing. Now, I do understand the imperative to address the economic fears and the economic pain that people are going through. But we should have done this in our regular order of business. We could even have introduced this thing at our next meeting and set for a public hearing the same day according to the code, because the assembly can do that. But to use this meeting for that purpose is a real stretch of our procedures, and I find it to be an action that we should postpone. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. We have in the queue Ms. Kennedy, Mr. Weddleton, and Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would oppose the motion to postpone simply because we are in such an unusual time, and obviously even the fact that you're sitting there in the Lusac Library at this moment with about maybe half of the members there, but because we're in this lockdown situation, I think we recognize that there are things that are moving really fast, that we do have to have good conversations, and the best way to do that for this particular item, because it is such a volatile issue, seems to be one that we should get to sooner rather than later. So by setting it for a public hearing next week, we can have some good conversation at that meeting. Maybe there'll even be more of us in attendance. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I don't think we need to postpone anything until May the 5th for something that's as critical as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Weddleton? Mr. Weddleton, I think you might be on mute.
I'm always on mute when I'm most eloquent. Sorry about that. About Mr. Constant's point, it's true that by some tradition we don't use this meeting for other purposes, but it's not that this is political. This is an important issue, as we all know, and we could just lay this on the table at our next meeting and vote on it, but it's so important that would be unfair. We want to give the world a view of what we're looking at here, and they think it's just more fair that way. So this is a fairly simple thing to just introduce. The discussion will really happen at our next meeting and wasn't expected to happen at this one. So given the unique circumstances, this is very appropriate to use this meeting, which is an assembly meeting, though it's got a light agenda. It's no different than other meetings, truly. So I do oppose the postponement to May 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm looking for a little clarification from our lawyers and also from the movers, or the sponsors of this ordinance, a resolution rather. So is the issue that they need a week for a public hearing, and so by laying it on the table today, they're meeting that deadline, or Mr. Constant, do you believe they're actually a day short? And is that part of the issue, or is it just that you think it's inappropriate to do it at this meeting? And then if the lawyers could weigh in as well, that would be helpful. I mean, they could have done this without a public hearing and just laid it on the table next Tuesday and voted on it, and I think we all benefit from having the public have a week to look at it. So I don't have a problem with it, but I want to understand what the various objections are.
Thank you. Mr. Gates, do you want to try to answer those questions?
Yes. This is Dean Gates, for those on the phone. The 7 days notice issue for setting the public hearing, it's in the charter and it's applicable to ordinances in Charter Section 1001. The code has, in Section 2360, said that for resolutions, we will follow the procedures for ordinances in conducting the public hearing. However, it's two sections. Subsection A says the Assembly can set public hearings and resolutions at such time and with such public notices the Assembly may determine. And then B is follow the other procedures for ordinances. I think A, for setting the time for public hearing, as the Assembly may determine, allows you to set public notice 3 days prior, 4 days, 10 days. It isn't bound. Setting a public hearing for resolutions is not tied to the at least 7 days notice as it is with ordinances because of what the code has said about the Assembly's authority to set the time and the public notice as you determine.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson, do you have any follow-up questions to that?
It looks like Ms. Vogel might want to weigh in, but otherwise, if Mr. Constant wants to respond too.
Go ahead, Ms. Vogel.
Thank you. Yeah, so looking to that same code section, I would just say there's some ambiguity in the code about what you need to set a public hearing for a resolution. So for ordinances, which would require a longer notice period than what we've got here, a first, second, and third sets it for public hearing. This provision of code just says the Assembly may set public hearing on resolutions at such time and with such public notice as the Assembly may determine. So there's an ambiguity going on there where it's not clear that a first, second, and third is the Assembly deciding on a time because it's just a first, second, and third. So I think that this is an ambiguity. I understand that there's probably been a significant practice of allowing a first, second, and third to set public hearings, probably without debate. So I just want to offer that there's an ambiguity in the code, which is not a full answer for you.
Thank you, Ms. Vogel. Mr. Constant, were you in the queue?
I wasn't. She asked the question of me. I haven't put myself in the queue, but I'm prepared to answer. We're effectively relitigating a question that was asked and on the table at our last meeting. And so what we're attempting to do now is, in a short-changed effort, which we set out at June 5th, the mayor said at May 5th, we're attempting to again substitute our will into that question. And I think that these matters at this time are certainly best left in the hands of the administration. And if we're going to be introducing items at these meetings when we would normally just be having pretty much a kumbaya moment of maybe even cake, I think. Instead, we're now in the first phase of a debate of us asserting our will back into the question of what the public health demands are for our community. And it's, in my opinion, not proper, and I think we should postpone it until it is.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that these are indeed unprecedented times, and we have limited tools as Assembly members. I wish they perhaps were not so blunt, but that is how it is, and I urge a vote against postponing. And I think there's still room for cake.
My question for Mr. Gates or the clerk is, if we vote to postpone and we postpone the public hearing until May 5th, can the movers, if they wanted to, create a new resolution that they could lay on the table on the 28th without public hearing?
Well, that's an unusual question. Technically, it seems like you could. Sure.
Okay.
And it's discretionary to set a public hearing at all. It does seem a little redundant to have two the same, one trying to set a public hearing and one not. But if anyone else has something to add, that's fine. I don't have good legal guidance on that.
Thank you, Mr. Gates.
Technically, it should be allowed.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to speak to the motion to postpone?
I think I would. You are all lovely people. And in the interests of comity, I think it's important for you to recognize that events might have superseded this entire discussion altogether. And I would recommend that in the future, before you engage in any of these kind of discussions, maybe people come directly to the administration and ask what's going on. So let me tell you what has happened that supersedes this particular event. We've been working closely with the administration, with the state administration. The governor announced today that there are going to be openings at the state level on Friday. He might have jumped the gun a little bit and said that we're going to be moving towards a Monday date. What our plan is to work with local businesses, so we have protocols in place for local businesses so they can open safely sometime next week based on the timetables that those businesses choose to open, so long as it is as the conditions are met with the metrics in this city, metrics that relate to declining rates of COVID in the community, which seem to have been met, and a certainty in the amount of testing that exists, which we are, if we have not achieved at this point, are close to achieving. So I think this debate, while I always appreciate a venture into the esoteric, bizarre, Byzantine, and labyrinthine world of the rules of order, and it is fascinating, I offer you a way out. You can just follow the string that I have laid in front of you and escape.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You left out Kafkaesque. Okay, so right now, is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone? All right, seeing none, please vote on the motion to postpone until May 5th.
Mr. Weddleton?
No.
Ms. Salatel? Oh, she's absent. Ms. Kennedy?
No.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Yes.
That motion fails 4-5. So now we had a motion to introduce. We haven't typically debated that motion. I'm going to rule that we are not going to debate that motion, and it is set for public hearing. If anyone would like to challenge that ruling, they can do so now. Okay, so this has been set for public hearing on the 28th of April. All right, so we have one other item that is potentially laid on the table. Item 9F2, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code sections 14.60.030 and 15.95.020 to enact a sunset date for the requirement to charge a fee for providing an alternative bag. Would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Kennedy, it is your item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I think I'd like to go ahead and move to introduce with public hearing for May the 5th.
Okay. Moved. Is there a second or a third? Is there a second and a third? All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Kennedy. I believe that dies for lack of a second and a third.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. All right. With that, maybe we can get back to the kumbaya. That concludes our regular agenda. We are now to...
Mr. Chair, one last thing before we move on.
Mr. Constant.
I just would say for the record, moving forward, that this meeting is a regular meeting, and I will treat it as such for the purposes of any regular business going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. A grim portent of things to come. We are now on item 15A, certification of the April 7th, 2020 regular municipal election. Madam Clerk, what motions do we need?
You would want a motion to certify would be fine, or a motion to approve. Is a document say certification? Yes, you can either do motion to approve the AM.
Move to approve the certification.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Constant, seconded by Mr. Weddleton. Does everyone have those documents in front of them? I don't believe I do, actually. Thank you. Okay. Is that a debatable motion?
The motion to approve, it is.
Yep. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve? I'm going to wait for Ms. Quinn Davidson. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Jones. And looking at the list of rejected envelopes and the reasons why, it looks like a big chunk, 413 ballot return envelope postmarked after Election Day. I was just curious because there were some folks, some of my constituents who thought that they could mail the ballot after the boxes were closed, after 8 p.m. And I don't know if you have any sense of like how late those were postmarked, if they were all postmarked like the next day. I mean, it seems like that might be an opportunity, at least for some of us maybe, to get the word out that, and I know it was out, that it needs to be postmarked that day. But I'm just wondering if you got a spate of them right after or if they just kind of trickled in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, the 413 were came on the 8th through the 17th, and there were probably the most of them came on the 8th, and then there were still large numbers. Even today, we probably got 50 that are postmarked after Election Day, even today. So one of the things that we're working on is trying to tell people to get their envelope hand canceled by a postal worker either the day before or on Election Day, because we have had anecdotal evidence from voters who have said, I dropped that off at 4 o'clock on Monday and it didn't get postmarked. So we're just trying to tell people to be sure to get that hand canceled by an election worker. One of the messages we did try to tell people was to vote as soon as you get that ballot. We did not know what was going to happen this election, and we really wanted people to get them in early. But that was disappointing for us that we couldn't count that large number of ballots as well.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Are there any other questions for Ms. Jones or discussion on this item? Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I just would offer my thanks and also congratulations as well that this election did happen during a pandemic. You know, Anchorage hasn't seen one of those since 1954 and probably never during an election. And so it's much to the credit of the very hardworking members of the clerk, which we recognize you in the resolution, but just wanted to say it now as part of this record. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Any other discussion on this motion? Yes. Oh, yeah. Please, Ms. Jones.
Through the chair, and I would like to point out that there is an automatic recount that'll be required with this election based on the changes that the Assembly made to the code, earlier this year. There is less than 0.5% margin on Proposition 1, which was the life safety access roads. And we're going to tentatively do that recount on Thursday, the 23rd at 1:30 p.m. at the Election Center. If anyone would like to attend, if they could please email elections@muni.org. we'll have a limited number of people that can observe the recount. So, and then we'll be back to the assembly to certify the recount results.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any other questions or discussion? If not, please double check.
Just one last thing.
Yeah, Mr. Constant.
So I'm looking at the numbers we just received, and I just would like to point out that there were some precincts that showed up with the high 60s, mid 60s, high 50% rate. And so just big credit to folks like Stuckagon Heights and in Sand Lake in some parts, in Westchester, Inlet View. So congratulations to everybody who decided to show up.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, not seeing any other discussion. Please vote on this motion.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Mr. Perez Verdia?
Yes.
That motion passes 9-0. The election has been certified. All right, at this time, Madam Clerk, would you like to administer the oath of office? So for the folks getting sworn in, if you want to join, be spread out, but here up front.
Okay, Jamie, can you get a picture of everybody from there? Okay. There, yeah, there. How's that?
You guys want to scoot in just a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Oh, good.
Good spatial awareness, Mr. Constant.
Okay. So this is, of course, repeat after me. And when I say your name, be sure to say your name. Okay? And then afterwards, you'll sign the oath. And there's 2 copies, so you can take one with you. All right? So raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, say your name, solemnly swear or affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Alaska, and the Charter of the Municipality of Anchorage, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of assembly member to the best of my ability. Congratulations. Yeah, and then I'll certify both of them and you can keep one. Okay? Yeah. You're welcome, Jamie. You probably shouldn't go too far. Mr. Chair, would you like to? Jamie?
Ms. Allard, if you'd like to sit up here where it says Perez Verdia. Oh, there we go. We got a new one for you right there.
thought about that. Well, yeah, we're ready. We just want to make sure we were ready. It's a motion to reorganize, Mr. Chair.
These are context.
Oh, where do I lost my? Where did it go? There it is. All right, we're now on item 15C, Assembly Reorganization. Is there a motion to reorganize? Moved by Mr. Peterson. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. So now we will turn the process over to the municipal clerk.
Could you ask if there's, well, I guess it doesn't matter if there's unanimous, but we assume there is, right?
Oh, yeah. Is there any opposition to that motion to reorganize? All right. Not hearing any opposition to the motion to reorganize, we will begin the process.
Okay. Mr. Chair and Assembly members, we sent out a email to you earlier this week to explain the process that we were going to use, and Assembly Counsel Dean Gates and Deputy Clerk Jennifer Veneklausen and I developed this procedure since it's going to be a little bit different. But reorganization is specified in the code, and we've got some additional procedures that we're going to follow due to the COVID-19 emergency. And so what's going to happen is we need to take a roll of all of the members. The clerk shall then ask for nominations for the chair. After nominations close, a secret ballot shall be taken by the members attending in person, voting on the ballot form distributed by the clerk or the deputy clerk. For members participating telephonically, we'll give you an instruction when to disconnect from the meeting call-in number or when to mute your phone if you have a different number for us to call. And the deputy clerk will call on the clerk's office cell phone, will confirm the member's identity, and then we'll ask the member for their vote for chair. And then the clerk will take the phone and confirm the member's identity and ask the member for their vote for chair. When the clerk and deputy clerk confirm each member's vote for chair, we will write it on the blank ballot form that the members here in the chambers are voting on. And then we're going to add it to all the other ballot forms to be counted. And we'll tally the votes and we'll announce if a member got a majority. So to start, let's do roll call. And so the roll call is Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zolotel is absent. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
And Mr. Dyson is absent. Pardon?
Ms. Allard. Mr.
Ms.
Dyson
Allard.
is no longer on. Mr.
I'm
Dyson.
sorry, Ms. Allard. I'm reading my list. Ms. Allard.
Here.
I am going to change this now and add her. Do you see that? Yeah. So I've got her in these. And I saved it when I go to the roll call. Let me, what you do. Let's just. All right. So, the floor is now open for nominees for chair.
I would nominate Mr. Rivera for chair.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing and seeing none, the nominations are closed and the clerks will pass out the ballot forms. Mr. Perez-Verdia, we're going to call you first, so could you please disconnect from the meeting phone and we'll call you on that number and get your vote.
Thank you.
What's that? So,
It's an abuse all around, and it's an abuse that you suffer from now on. So meeting, coming up with extraordinary measures to keep redoing, relitigating. Except what we decided last week is to let them run the ship for a little bit longer, while navigating the shoals of this very complex thing. And so what we intended to do is, again, insert our 12 or 11.
I don't think so. I think he said they were starting to open on Friday. But
6 on him.
we don't have to,
Just,
we have our own powers.
I almost read all this.
We hunkered down before he did, and we
Ordinance that allows
closed
us-
restaurants before he did, and he can open stuff up, but we don't have to open it here.
Oh, but see,
But there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, the governor said we can open, so we can open, and then we'll have to
scream the loudest, oh, unconstitutional.
explain it. What's that?
I think a lot of people are going to stay hunkered down anyway.
Yeah, I hope so. Oh.
Assembly members, your new chair is Felix Rivera.
What time?
Are you ready to do this again? Yes. Okay. Okay, Assembly members, we're going to follow the same procedure for Vice Chair. Before we do that, I would like to confirm, Mr. Weddleton, are you still on the phone?
I am on the phone.
Ms. Kennedy, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
And Mr. Perez-Urdia?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you. Nominations are open for Vice Chair.
I nominate Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Second.
That's good. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair? Okay, Assembly members, the clerks will distribute the ballots in the chambers, and we'll make the phone calls to the members on the phone. ready, Jamie?
What am I doing? Oh,
We're voting for vice chair.
wasn't there only one person?
Yes, but you can vote for anyone that's eligible.
Oh, okay. Thank you. What's that? I know a little bit.
Assembly members, your new chair is Austin Quinn Davidson.
Vice Chair.
Oh.
Chair.
That was. Should I say that again? Assembly members, your new vice chair is Austin Quinn Davidson.
There you go.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. So moving on in our agenda, I think that takes us to audience participation. Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have anyone?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one person for audience participation, Mr. Eugene Carl Haberman.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Haberman. You're on with the Anchorage Assembly.
Welcome, Mr. Haberman. We are at audience participation. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, Alaska resident for over 42 years. Approximately 20 of those years a resident of Anchorage and currently a resident in the Manitou Valley. What I'm going to briefly say to you is still my ongoing concern. This is the 9th election that I audit the public process, and this is the 9th election that I declared it illegitimate. No one won this election. Everyone lost. I thought couldn't see it getting any worse, but you proved me wrong. It has been worse. Remind you, at the previous election, when you certified the election the year before, I witnessed a shout game by commissioners when they were reviewing the ballots. Now, in this election, I couldn't have the opportunity to witness, and any audio video I don't see on the city website for me to review before this meeting. This is an example of where is the transparency, and the key is observation of an election, and how can you have that? And then I would encourage anyone to put out a strong legal opposition to this election, because it just shows that the most important decision the governing body has to make, such as assembly, is to certify the election. But you certify the election tonight, as you've done in previous years, the assembly, and you allowed for public comment after you're certified. And that is in violation of Alaska Statute 29.20.020A, providing a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard. You make a decision, and then you say, okay, we'll hear from the public now. Another ongoing sham. And with all due respect, it's frustrating, but I'll remind you, the public out there, we're in a health emergency, world health emergency, and yes, you have to take certain steps to protect everyone, but you basically sideline the public to be able to see what's going on. And note, even your organization today, when you selected who's going to be chair and vice chair, Well, who voted for who? Where's the openness of your decisions? Every time you make a decision, you need to have an openness and announcement who voted for who, not a secret ballot. Excuse me, you're elected and you're doing secret ballots for who you're appointing chair and vice chair, more of the same. So that leaves my comment because I have 22 seconds to spare, and I hope we all get through this whole mess. Thank you. That ends my comment with 15 seconds to spare.
Thank you for speaking. Do we have anyone else?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on in our agenda, special orders, we don't have any. Moving on to assembly comments. I'll go ahead and start on this side with Madam Vice Chair.
Or Miss Allard?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, sorry. I'm used to only looking at this end. Miss Allard. Okay. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to welcome Miss Allard. It's a fun group, and we're happy to have you here. And just say thanks to all my colleagues for all your great work.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Same. Welcome, Jamie, and I look forward to working with you, and it should be interesting. You'll see it's quite a complex and amazing community we live in. And to everyone else, congratulations, and look forward to the business.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Ms. Allard. And you've got some big shoes to fill. We're going to be missing Mr. Dyson. It was great to work with him. We'll probably get a chance to talk about his career at a future date. But thank you and congratulations to all of the winners.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would echo those comments. Welcome, Ms. Allard, and congratulations to my colleagues that have been reelected. I want to say briefly thank you to Mr. Weddleton for his help and support as vice chair during this really challenging time these last couple months. Also, thank you to the clerk staff, to Dean Gates, and all the other staffers who really stepped up during this pandemic. I think your performance was exemplary. Finally, I'd just like to note for the record that everything regarding the election that Mr. Haberman said was legally and factually inaccurate. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to Ms. Allard, and also to outgoing Chair Dunbar and Mr. Weddleton as well. Thank you for all that you've done during a really difficult and challenging time. And my thanks as well to Ms. Jones for all your hard work and the hard work of your team. And I am honored to be here and excited to work with all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the phone, Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. Welcome, Miss Allard. I hope to meet you someday. And I have to say, it was really enjoyed being vice chair for that appropriate amount of time. It was very interesting with all the stuff that were going on. Forrest did a tremendous job. I really admired that. And the staff was just so quick and hardworking and versatile during these quick and very profound changes in the way we operate. It was just really a great opportunity for me to be there and really be mostly a bystander on that. So anyway, congratulations to the new chair. You did a great job before. Look forward to it again in Austin. Same to you. So thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say welcome and congratulations to Ms. Allard as well, and to all of those newly or re-elected assembly members. And congratulations to Mr. Rivera for chair again, and congratulations to Ms. Austin Quinn Davidson. And Austin, I wanted to say on a personal note that I thought that what you put in the newspaper on Mr. Dyson was just a lovely piece to read, and I just thank you so much for doing that. I think there are a lot of people in the Chugiak Eagle River that will share that sentiment. So hopefully we'll get to all say something to him personally to thank him for all of his many years of service. But I just thank you so much for putting in the time and the effort to actually make that public statement on his behalf. So, and my thanks to Ms. Jones and her staff. This has really been an unprecedented time, as we say a lot, but they have definitely had their challenges of how to figure out how to make public process work when everything that we know about how we think it should work doesn't work. So I appreciate all of their stepping up to the challenge. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia. You might be on mute. Mr. Perez-Verdia? Okay, moving on. Just some quick comments from me. First, want to congratulate and welcome Ms. Allard. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Want to give a big thanks to Mr. Dunbar and Mr. Weddleton for your leadership over the last few months and for working through a lot of the logistics and technology with the clerk's office to get us to a point where we can begin holding regular work sessions and committee meetings. I want to thank you to my colleagues for trusting me again in this position. I'm really looking forward to working with Ms. Quinn Davidson. Like I did last time when I was working with Ms. LaFrance, I want to be transparent about the goals that we hope to achieve during our tenure as Assembly leadership. So just like last time, I like things in three. We had 3 goals with Ms. LaFrance, so we have 3 new goals. First is to make Assembly actions as inclusive, transparent, and easy to follow as possible. So in essence, bringing more people into the room, although in a different way now. Second goal is more effectively communicate what the Assembly does, including our accountability measures for those already in the room. And then third goal is to improve processes and communication with the administration to ensure implementation of our priorities, including within the budget and legislative program. I've already had several good conversations with the administration about how to begin reasonably ramping up Assembly work, and I look forward to continuing that conversation with the body, the Rules Committee on Friday. I'm just generally looking forward to continuing working with this group and collaborating with everyone. I think the better we work as a body, the better for our constituents. I do believe that the mayor may want to speak, so I want to turn it over to him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Congratulations. Madam Vice Chair, congratulations. Ms. Allard, welcome, and congratulations to you. I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on my friend, Fred Dyson. I've known Fred for 25 years. We were freshman legislators together, and we have had what he characterizes as a strange and wonderful relationship. One of us is strange and the other one is wonderful. He is never quite clear on who is whom. The first time I had a floor debate with him, I called him a troglodyte in public, and he has never forgotten that and loves to tell the story. But one of the things that has been remarkable about Fred is that even though we, at that time, were on very different sides of the political spectrum, we found principled ways of working together, and we co-authored a number of pieces of legislation which are in effect today. But Fred is a man of intense principle and strict adherence to the idea of fair process. And it is one of the reasons why he is such an exemplary public servant and why his modeling, I think, has benefited a generation of Alaskans who have seen him in public service on this Assembly, in the state legislature, and again in this Assembly again. And I am sorry that he is gone. I'm glad Ms. Allard is here. She is a different perspective to gaze upon than he is. He was fond of wearing flannel. If you want to start wearing flannel, we would accommodate that. But Fred Dyson is one of a kind. He is a real Alaskan, and he is in my pantheon of great Alaskans. And I just wanted to thank this body for the welcome that you extended him and giving him the space to be Fred. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You didn't want to speak, Mr. Constant?
I think I don't want to follow that.
Okay. Unfortunately, I do want to follow that, but on a less serious topic. Perhaps more serious. I have 2 letters here that I want to encourage my colleagues who are present. Apologies, Mr. Weddleton, Ms. Kennedy, and Mr. Perez-Verdia. One is to our congressional delegation regarding some of the work that the Senate already did, but at least we can send this out to Representative Young. And then one is to members of the Anchorage Caucus regarding some issues on rent and particularly late fees for rent. We are preempted from taking any action on that. So I would encourage my colleagues, if they're so interested, to read these letters over and sign them. My intent is to try to get these out tonight. Okay, with that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just since you went past Mr. Dyson, I would like to speak briefly to Mr. Dunbar's short term as chair. When that reorganization happened, he said one of his main goals was to slow the body down. And I hope he never says that ever again.
Thank you. So with that, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned.